Hi everyone, it's Nick. Welcome back to my channel. Okay, in this video today, we are going to be talking about influencer culture and how it shapes interior design. And I specifically want to look at the last 10 years and think of these three mega influencers that I think have fundamentally changed the last 10 years of design and what that means for the future of trends and design going forward, what that says about us as a culture, and also how do we, as consumers of media, sort of arm ourselves to make sure that we're actually getting the house that we want and not necessarily what we're told via Instagram. So let's get going. Okay, I'm gonna be talking a lot about personal style in this video, and if you feel like your own personal style has been failing you, then you might wanna check out Quince, today's sponsor. Quince is focused on sustainable and quality pieces, whether that's clothing, whether that's home decor, accessories, they've got you covered. So from European linen apparel and buttery soft bamboo bedding to cast iron Dutch ovens and beautiful Italian leather bags, Quince brings all the high-end essentials together in one place. I got this Mongolian cashmere crew neck sweater here from Quince. Check it out. I feel like I just need a pumpkin spice latte and like a big scarf around my neck in order to really complete the look. I don't know why I'm holding my pumpkin spice latte up here, but you get my drift. Definitely, I just feel like this is so cozy and warm and perfect for fall and the Christmas season. By the way, I'm also still obsessed with this amazing Italian leather backpack that I have, which is just amazing for travel, stores all my accessories, and is very buttery soft and amazing. And the thing is with Quince is that you're getting both of these things for more than 50% off what you get from similar retailers, which is amazing. Quince sells directly to you, so they work directly with the manufacturers, cutting out all the middlemen for a whole variety of products, which is amazing. So you always know that you're getting an amazing price. So whether you're upgrading your home or your wardrobe or whatever, go ahead and check out Quince. Use code Nick in the description, by the way, for 365 days free returns and also free shipping. So go ahead, use code Nick, and let's get back to the rest of the video. Okay, so first of all, let's go back to like 2015, because I think that's really interesting and really where we started to see social media start to really fundamentally change how we design our homes, honestly. Yes, there's lots of other influencers along the way that have come and gone, that have done little things and tweaks and whatever, but I do think that the first influencer, the mega influencer we need to talk about is Joanna Gaines. So Joanna Gaines, I have made fun of Joanna before. I think she's probably adorable and sweet and lovely and does not need me, a jerk on the internet, saying anything about her. But like, honestly, we have to talk about Joanna because I do think that Joanna Gaines fundamentally changed how we did design in like the 2013 to kind of 2018 era. Obviously, she's still doing her thing, so I'm not trying to take away from that. But I think when I think of Joanna Gaines, and a lot of people still do, we think of this period of about 5 years where she sort of defined modern farmhouse and honestly shaped how people build their homes, especially in sort of a suburban American sort of environment where you can just fundamentally see her stamp of approval. So let's talk about her design and what makes it sort of interesting and so influential at the time. So you could probably say that Joanna Gaines is best summed up as modern farmhouse. Everything we know of modern farmhouse. There has been many memes made, maybe even some jokes on the internet, if you can believe it, on YouTube, which I don't know who would do that, but like these people, you know, like some people have made some comments about modern farmhouse and their time, and Joanna Gaines may have been caught some strays. And so let's talk about why, right? I mean, what is modern farmhouse? I mean, it's usually known for trying to bring sort of a very agrarian lifestyle into the suburbs of Denver. And maybe it doesn't fit, maybe it lacks context, one would say, but not Joanna, because she really defined this style, right? She made it, basically. I mean, other people may have made it, and she was influenced by others, of course, but really we're talking about lots of shiplap, we're talking about lots of black and white. We're talking about those white farmhouses with those really heavy sort of black trim on the windows. We're talking about that huge sort of farmhouse table right there in the center of the dining room, right? We're talking about, of course, should I mention shiplap? I feel like deserves mentioning a good few more times. Lots of farmhouse, different nods here and there. Of course, we've got the signs, right? People loved putting the signs in the mid 2010s, right? So the farm signs, the little chickens and all that sort of stuff, but basically creating a traditional farmhouse style, which has been around for a very long time, right? In the context of North America, it's been around for a very long time and a little bit different than its sort of European counterparts, but you know, it's very much kind of that old West sort of style, right? It's a very agrarian lifestyle. And then what they did is took some of those rustic elements that just didn't really make sense for modern life, because let's be honest, people like modern lighting, people like modern plumbing, right? And brought some of those traditional rustic agrarian pieces that made sense and sort of modernized them for 2015, right? Basically popularized it and made it more accessible to a person in North America at the time, right? So this style dominated for many years, right? We saw it everywhere. And there were lots of different other influencers and bloggers and things that of course really also got behind this style, and it's still loved by many. hated by a few as well, but it was a very popular style of its time. And I think before that, because she had, you know, the Fixer Upper show, and it was the Chip on Joanna Gaines show, and like all the rest, because they had all that, they just had so much influence and so much power, and fundamentally sort of shaped design for that period. We saw all those different design elements being used throughout, and I still think we're seeing echoes of that. So I think it's really interesting to see just how popular that style is. Looking at Google Trends, this graph, you can start to see when you search Joanna Gaines's name, she was very popular in sort of this 2016, 2017. This is when she sort of peak of popularity. The show, Fixer Upper show, was in sort of full swing, was very popular. Joanna was very popular, and this is where we really saw this style sort of take off. And then as we left the Joanna Gaines era a little bit, and as I said, no shade to her, she's still doing her own thing and she's still doing all that stuff. But I think what we know Joanna Gaines' style to be, that signature modern farmhouse, as we got closer to the pandemic, we got closer to 2020, the styles shifted and it started to be a little bit less modern farmhouse, and we started to see more of sort of a transitional style. So what I mean by that is it started to become a little bit bridging that gap between some traditional elements, but also some of those modern quirks as well, right? So instead of seeing things leaning so far rustic like they did before, you started to see much more of kind of a little bit more modern elements, something that was a little bit more of an organic modern, more sort of organic materials being used, a little bit more detail in some of the style as opposed to sort of the modern part that we had before in modern farmhouse, and just seeing a little bit more of a neutral color palette. So less of that high contrast black and white, which you saw so popular, black fixtures and white everything else, white shiplap. Instead, it started to lean a little bit more natural, a little bit more neutral, and we started to see palettes became a little bit warmer. And I think the person, this mega influencer that really spearheaded this design style and became really, really popular is gonna have to be Studio McGee. So if you're not familiar, Shay McGee, she launched her show with her husband. I believe it came out on Netflix in 2020, and that was really, she had her business doing design before that, but this is where I think she really started to take off. And you can see that in this Google Trends, right? You can see that she now sort of took over, and in my opinion, inherited the crown from Joanna Gaines, and Shay McGee became the one that became the most popular, I think. And her style is so popular even today, but I'm gonna get to that because there's a third person waiting in the wings. So just you wait for that one. But I do think that her style became so popular. You saw a lot of like a modern sofa with maybe something like a quirky daybed. Palettes became super neutral, right? Lots of creams and whites and beiges. And I even talked about this on my channel, and I was doing YouTube in 2020. Palettes started to lean a little bit warmer. You started to see more of those warm, neutral, natural, organic elements being brought in. All of that was encompassed in Studio McGee's style. And again, we were all stuck in the pandemic, so we were all stuck at home. So everybody was watching and, you know, content like mine. Welcome if you were here then. Thank you for watching. And also Studio McGee and watching that style. And I think, yes, there's lots of other creators and YouTubers and Instagram people that have been talking about a very similar style to Studio McGee. I do think that I credit Studio McGee with being that sort of mega influencer at the time. Just really take over and dominate that period of like 2020 into like 2024, 2023, something like that. Okay, and then we have the third wave, right? The third mega influencer that I think has really taken over is as we've seen that movement a little bit away from that sort of transitional style that was so popular with Studio McGee, I think we've seen that evolution and turn into Chris Loves Julia, which I think Chris Loves Julia is the new mega influencer of the moment that has really shaped design. Now they're much more of a slower burn, I think, than the previous two. See, the previous two had such big hot shows, you know what I mean? Like they had the Netflix show or the HGTV show. I think Chris Loves Julia started out as a blog back in like 2009 from what I can tell, and has really had a slow rise in popularity. But I do think as people wanted more movement away from modern design, we started to see the return of traditional design, something I have talked a lot about on this channel, right? Saw this a lot in 2023, continuing on here now in 2025, still very much a hot, popular style. So for example, if this was the popular style back in 2016, 2017, this became really popular in sort of 2020, 2021, and now we're seeing more contemporary design, you know, here in 2025 looking more like this. And you can really see that this leans a lot more traditional. There's, you know, lots of natural elements going on here, but the shapes are a little bit more interesting, a lot more detail, a lot of ornamentation, less simple flat lines. This is not a mid-century modern design, right? This is much more suited for something like an older home. This is almost like an arts and crafts kind of home, if you will, right? Lots of patterned wallpaper, lots of interesting color, lots of depth of color, lots of really cool upholstery happening, and less about sort of clean, simple, basic modern, and instead a lot more detail and ornamentation and craftsmanship being brought back into the home. So I think Chris Loves Julia is a really good example of sort of that mega influencer that I see that has really dominated. And you can see this also in the Google Trends as well. Much more of a slower burn, but you can really see it reaching sort of, I don't know if it's the peak or if the peak is just going to keep going, but you can definitely see search terms across Google much higher now than they were even just a few years ago. And I think that really reflects that kind of her time has come. And that's why this style that you see is so dominant right now. And you can see that it probably will be for the next couple of years until probably the next mega influencer comes along. Okay, now that I've told you about the 3 different phases, I want to touch base here on why. Why do we do this to ourselves and what does this mean? Well, when I honestly, I think it's really interesting, just if I may take a minute just to add my 2 cents. I do think it's really fascinating looking at these 3 couples and why we are so drawn to these 3 couples in particular and giving them so much attention and why their styles just make sense. And I do think, first of all, it's worth mentioning that each style sort of was in a way a good, interesting reaction to the style that came before it, which is so true with design. I've seen this for years. It's oftentimes just a pendulum swing going back and forth, right? Warm colors, cool colors, gray, beige, right? That's just how it works. People want new, and new is usually different than what's current or what was, right? That's almost by definition. So I think people are always looking for new and different, and the way to achieve that is just to swing the pendulum back and forth, because there's not a whole lot of things you can necessarily do sometimes in design, right? So I do think it's worth mentioning that each style that each of these couples sort of was talking about, their time had just come. It just sort of made sense that their style just sort of happened to fit the moment, okay? But I do think I can't really also not point out that it really also is an interesting question of who gets to make trends and who gets to participate in design, right? Yes, there's lots of interesting designers, Athena Calderon and Colin King and like stylists and designers and things that have come, and influencers, right? And yes, they do all have an impact. But when looking at these 3, I can't help notice that these are heterosexual, good-looking couples that are probably in their mid-30s to mid-40s. You can't help but notice that they all kind of have that same vibe. And I just find that really fascinating. Can I just say, I think it's because, correct me if I'm wrong, because you all do in the comment section, so go nuts down there. But I think this also forms these couples and these influencers sort of have a bit of escapism, especially for the target demographic for this content and for these products, which is middle-aged women. Because middle-aged women are the ones, which you might be one, are the ones that are really driving these trends and the ones that are consuming these products. And I think that these couples, not only because again, their styles just came at the right time and the right moment for their styles, but I think these influencers in particular, there's something about it that sort of tickles the brain of a middle-aged woman that just, it feels like a form of escapism. When I look at these couples, I think, okay, they are somewhat aspirational, and I think that's why these influencers have so much influence. It's not just the style, it's them as people. Because I also think it's worth noting that these are female-driven couples. Yes, it's Chris Loves Julia, and it's, Joanna. We all know the women. I think they're really driving this partnership and why they're really relevant and influential, because women see themselves in these influencers. And then the men that they have next to them, I think are always really interesting, right? Because I think it sort of appeals to a lot of women. I think a lot of women, you may be one, try to get their boyfriends and their husbands interested in interiors, try to get them interested in design, to go home goods shopping with them on a Sunday, to go to IKEA on a Friday night, to watch a Nick Lewis video on a Saturday morning, and the husbands are like, yeah, I'm good. Yes, there's a lot of men that are really interested in design, but I think for a lot of women, this is a form of escapism because these influencers have husbands that are supportive of their career, actually take an interest in design and their home, are interested in their hobbies and their passions and things that they're interested about. And I think that's a form of escapism for women. I think they look at these influencer couples and think, this is an ideal. I wish my husband paid a little bit more attention to our home or cared about shiplap as much as I do. And so I think women sort of see themselves in these influencers, attach themselves kind of to these avatars, and then sort of wish that their partner maybe was a little bit more like that, I mean, it's just so fascinating, I think. It says so much about, I think, how people buy and what they buy and what does influence even mean. I'll also say really quick, because I noticed their blog name is Chris Loves Julia, which I don't know the story behind that, but even that I think says a lot, right? It's not Julia loves Chris, which I'm sure she does, but it's Chris Loves Julia. It's about her. Do you know? I don't know. Maybe there's a story behind the blog name that I don't know about, but the prioritization is, her interests and her what wants and desires, and then she creates this beautiful, amazing, gorgeous home for them. But I think that's really fascinating, isn't it? I don't know, maybe I'm alone on that, but I just think that that's a really interesting choice of name. It just feels like these are female influencers that are being very supported which let's be honest, they're pumping out money. So obviously there's a financial motivation here. But these are men that are very supportive of their wives' careers and sense of design and love of the home. And I think that's something that a lot of women that are consuming this content and buying these products, I think that's something they care a lot about. Okay, now finally, let's like bring it back for a minute because I can wax poetic about this all day, but let's just be real for a second. What does this actually mean? I think it means that I worry that this is somewhat the death of personal design, that people are so interested in just consuming Instagram content or influencer content from these people that are, for whatever reason, a variety of reasons, I think, attractive at that moment. And they sort of take that inspiration and they just basically copy paste their own home. And we all do it, whether we like to admit it or not. We are all influenced by trends. I think it's even with social media, we're even more influenced by trends because we see this content daily and we want to keep up with our peers. We want to look good. We don't want to look stupid, right? So we have to dress a certain way or we have to have our house styled a certain way. And so I think there is something to be said for people losing their personality in their own homes and instead copy pasting these designs, which come and go, like I mentioned in this video, but your own personal style is forever. That's the one thing that Joanna Gaines or Shay or whatever, Julia, will never have, and that is you putting the you in your own home. So I think the lesson of all, I don't really know what this video is about, to be honest with you, but I do think if you're gonna have a takeaway, it's yes, trends come and go and they're interesting and you can borrow from them as you will, but I think you also need to be a critical consumer of content and realize why are you influenced the way that you are? Why do you like what you like? Be honest about that. Take whatever ideas you have, take them in for your own, but don't ever forget to put the you in. What's the mood that you want to create in your space? What do you like? What do you enjoy? But even that can sometimes, you can be fooled because what you like might not be what you actually like. It might just be what Shay McGee tells you to like. And so you got to be really careful with that. But I think finding out those different hobbies that you're interested in, those, personal items that you love, places that you've been, that you've traveled to, that you've picked up, that you want to take home and display in your own home, right? This is what I think matters in the end, right? What's really beautiful and wonderful about interior design, I think, I've said it for years, is that unlike your own personal style, which is important, it reflects who you are, but you actually get to invite somebody in to your own home and be in that personal style. And I think that that's a really beautiful thing. You can welcome someone into your home and they get to experience what you wanted to create, your own personality, your own family's personality, and instead you get to actually bring them into that home and show it off to all of your friends and family. And I think that's a wonderful thing. So borrow from the trends that come and go. Yes, go for it. I'm always talking about trends on this channel, and I think they're just ideas that you may want to use, but don't ever forget that in the end, you're the one that gets to live there. What is the mood that you're trying to create? What is your hobbies and interests and things that you love that you can put in your own home? How can you customize it to your own sense of self and what represents your family? And then forget all the rest of it because none of it really matters. And in terms of what's next, I don't know. It really depends on who the next mega influencer is. I guarantee it's not me because I do not fit the mold of middle-aged woman with a husband. So I'm afraid that that's not me, but whoever it's going to be, I know will shape, for better or worse, the next 5 years of interior design. Okay, so that's it for me today, guys. I hope you really enjoyed this video. I'm going to link here to another one of my favorite videos that I think you'd really enjoy. So I will see you all in the next one. Thanks a lot. Bye.